Welcome to Life Stage Wealth Advisors, Life Stage Financial Education. I am here with Barana Variety and our first guest that we've had on our channel, a special guest. This is Shashi Mehrotra, and he has served as the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Investment Officer for the Legend Advisory Division of the Lincoln Investment Companies. He is responsible for managing the adaptive intelligent models, AIM, and is an early adopter of using artificial intelligence for investment management. So we're very excited. He's the chief designer for the asset allocation neural network, a computer model that uses mathematical algorithms to forecast the relative strengths for different asset classes. Shashi is also a member of the CFA Institute and the South Florida Financial Analyst Society. He's earned a BS in engineering from the University of Osmania, Hyderabad, India, and an MBA from Florida Atlantic University. So ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you, Shashi. Here is Shashi Mehrotra, and we can't wait to get to know you better today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for being here with us. So the first question I have is, I know that you're an American citizen, but what was it like growing up in India?
So different. You might probably know this. India is a poor country, and I moved here 33 years ago in 1989, August. It was a lot poorer then than it is now. It's the fifth largest economy now. It was probably not even in the top 50 at that point. And I'm using GDP for that measurement. So, but we were five of us. I have two siblings, so my parents and the three kids, we lived in one room. It wasn't even one bedroom, it was one room. But I don't tell you to make you feel bad for me. The funny thing is, I didn't even know I was poor because it's a relative game, right? Everybody around me was the same. My dad used to make $60 a month. That'll give you a perspective. Now, you can't really compare based on the cost of living there because it's a lot cheaper to live there, but we were poor. But as I reflect back, as a child, it's funny because I came to the conclusion that as a child, all you want is your parents' love and affection, and then you have a good childhood. So my childhood was great. We just played with cheaper toys. And as I said, I didn't know I was poor till I came to this country. And then I realized, like, wow, it really is the land of opportunities.
For sure. Was all of your education completed there, or was it completed here?
So half and half. K through 12 was obviously in India. I grew up there. I graduated from high school. And then I got my undergrad in mechanical engineering from Osmania University, as Matt said before, in India. But then I moved here in 1989, got my MBA while I was working. And then I also got the Chartered Financial Analyst, which is, it used to be a 3-year program. Mostly money managers choose to get that designation. I got it because I still think of myself as a math guy. Just to learn how these things work in the financial world, I wanted to get that designation, and I did that. And those two designations were in the United States of America.
Very impressive. So what made you want to come to the United States? What was the reason for that?
So this might sound like a cliche, land of opportunities. I mean, it truly is. Look, I've lived in 3 different continents and 4 different countries in those 3 continents. I can categorically tell you this is one of the best countries anybody could want to live in. Initially, I didn't know as much as I know today. I've lived here for 3.5 decades, almost 3.5 decades. And it truly is one of the best countries you could live in. Look, I've thought of India as the largest democracy that exists in the world. When I think of China, in my opinion, China is probably the largest dictatorship masqueraded as a communistic regime. Mm-hmm. But United States of America, I think, is the largest meritocracy in the world. Something tells me that's way better than anything else. I know the media likes to portray this country as not the greatest country, but I got to tell you, I vociferously disagree with them. This is one of the greatest countries. And it's funny because initially when I wanted to come here, it was mostly because of capitalistic reasons, because better opportunities and economic reasons. But now that I have lived here for 3.5 decades, it's more than that. I think Americans are probably one of the most welcoming people in the whole world. Our immigration policy is probably the most relaxed compared to the rest of the world.
Right.
Sure, you can find faults. No country is perfect, but unless you want to compare it to a utopian system that doesn't exist, comparing it to practical other countries, the way they do things, there's no really parallel to this country. So
I can relate with that. I actually am an immigrant myself, and I grew up in Albania. I was born there, which was a communist country for 45 years, and recently, became democratic in the late 90s. So I definitely can relate to what you're saying.
Sure.
Yeah. So my last question is, were you part of the Navy, and what did you do there?
So I wasn't a soldier for the Navy. I was working as a civilian. Actually, the project that I worked for was a sponsored project by the Navy in association with a local university, Florida Atlantic University, which is located in, they're one of their campuses. The main campus is located in Boca Raton, Florida. So when I moved here, I came to Boca Raton, Florida to work at Florida Atlantic University, but the project was being sponsored by the United States Navy. So I really worked as an engineer for them. It was, if I have to put it in a box, I would say it was more computer science and electrical engineering. Look, it was an interesting project, so I'll try to be short on this so I don't bore people with this, but we were working on a machine called a chirp sonar, which is a machine that sends high frequency sound waves. So it was in acoustics and vibration. So we're sending high frequency sound waves. I would sit on a ship, and I had 4 or 5 scuba divers who worked with me. They would dive into the ocean while I would sit on the ship on a computer analyzing the data that they would collect. So they would embed these hydrophones and transducers beneath the ocean floor, and we would send high frequency sound waves. And when the waves would get reflected back, I would collect that data. And I'm going to combine this at the end so you know what I'm talking about. When we get the data, turns out that there were empirical relationships of physical properties of the sediment in the ocean floor that you can detect with sound waves. So you could practically go on a ship with a chirp sonar sending sound waves, and you could say, you know what, the physical properties of the sediment a mile before looks like there might be oil there, because the porosity and the density changes when there's oil, because oil tends to seep through to the ocean floor to some extent. So that's just an example. That's not what we were trying to do at all. It was a project sponsored by the US Navy, so it was for their projects. But in essence, that's what we're trying to do. And people say, well, how do you convert that into what you do? Well, you know why? Because I still think I was working in pattern recognition. We were trying to find patterns to establish the accuracy of the chirp sonar using sound waves. Guess what? I'm still doing pattern recognition. I'm trying to find the patterns in financial markets based on mathematical, nonlinear mathematical relationships. So that's kind of the commonality between what I did for the Navy and what I do now.
Very, very interesting. Well, Matt will speak to you about managing money. So here you go.
Yeah, well, yeah, I love learning this, and obviously I've heard some of this before, so it's just every time I get something new, hearing Sashi's story. And I know you take a very unique approach to managing money by utilizing artificial intelligence, also known as AI. What made you want to use AI in the investment management?
So a few things. I'll start with lack of emotion. AI is supposed to be a computer that thinks like a human being, right? That's what they're trying to emulate. That being said, I've always talked about ANN, which is the Asset Allocation Neural Network, is the acronym we use for the model that we've created over the last 3 decades. And I think of her, and the only reason I refer to ANN as her is because of the acronym ANN, as a person without a heart. She's got a brain, but no heart. So that by default eliminates the emotion. As you can tell, and look, no better than you both. You deal with actual real clients. The whole reason we are in this business is because people are emotional about their money, and the twin emotions of greed and fear will often make you do irrational things. People tend to buy high, sell low because of emotions. They buy high because they get greedy. They sell low because they get fearful. And Well, because it's a computer model, she doesn't have any emotion. So she can help us make decisions cold-heartedly without emotion, so it can lead to better decisions. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want the people that watch this to get the impression that we are 100% quantitative. We are not by any means 100% quantitative. And is just one of the many tools we use. In fact, we use a lot of subjective tools. We look at sentiment data. We look at orders, factory orders. We look at GDP, capital utilization, unit labor cost, productivity, and that obviously seeps some human emotion in it. We try to be as less emotional as possible in our decision making, but I don't want people to get the impression that it's a black box methodology where it spits out the output and we blindly go with that. We don't. We've done this for over a quarter century, and we've learned, and the process has evolved. We've tried to make changes based on what we think works best. So does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And thanks for unpacking it the way you did. Now, how long have you been working with artificial intelligence? How many years have you been doing this?
So I'd say just short of 3 decades, so almost 3 decades. And look, the basic premise is if you and I, if all of us look around the rooms we're sitting in, you're all going to say, well, you know what, I can, and if I ask you how many dimensions can you see, you're all going to say 3, right? Because when I look around this room that I'm standing in, I can see height, length, and width. Most people can only see 3 dimensions. Albert Einstein was the first human being who claimed to be able to see the 4th dimension. That was the time dimension. Hey, I've been in this business about 3 decades, and I've spoken to a lot of smart people. I've interacted with a lot of smart people, and I can categorically tell you that none of the people I've spoken to can see the 4th dimension or the 5th dimension. So this is another reason we used Anne, because she's able to see. AI is supposed to be able to see multiple dimensions. The naked eye can only see 3 dimensions. Artificial intelligence can see multiple dimensions, and arbitrage pricing theory about the markets claims that the markets are operating in more than 3 dimensions. So you can't really capture the essence of the market dynamics just with the naked eye. And that's the reason we've used AI for the last 3 decades. And look, as I said, it's an evolving process. There are times when we've used more AI models than just Anne. There are times when we've only used Anne, and that changes. That changes based on the data we're getting. That changes based on the resources we have, and so on and so forth.
So how do you use artificial intelligence to manage the money of clients? How does that work?
So, as I said before, our output from Anne is one of the variables, one of the tools that we use. So when we get the output, we can also tell how high conviction the output is. And if the conviction, the user believes the conviction of an output is high, the user can decide to go with, place more weight on her output, and vice versa. So I'll give you some examples. We made a recent move to add value in November of last year. That was 100% based on AI. We used to use a model called VOG, V-O-G, that's the acronym, which stands for value or growth. This model, after being in growth for almost a decade, if not longer than that, switched on a dime to value. Happens to be the same time when Putin was starting to move his troops. Now, in hindsight, it all makes sense because I look at it and I'm like, of course it makes sense. But you know what? If I didn't have Vogue, I don't think I would have made that move. And it was a spectacular move, and it was a high conviction signal. One of our consultants actually created the model, and she's the one who ran the model, and she told us that, look, the model is switched. So 100% decision was all had to do with the model at that point. More recently, I moved into small cap value. Now, that decision was more a combination of AI and subjective parameters. So I'd say it's a mix of those two and something in the middle, depending on what decision we're making.
Wow. Interesting. So our final question for you is, we both understand you have a unique approach to pulling together your team of analysts. So can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. So yeah, you know what, you articulated it well. It is unique because we don't interview candidates. I've realized 2.5 decades ago that I can't talk to someone for an hour and decipher what their intelligence quotient is. I can't decipher how intelligent they are, how smart they are. So, we believe that financial markets are dancing to the tunes of numbers. So as long as you are smart enough with nonlinear mathematics, you can decipher the tune to which the market's dancing by playing with the numbers. So we hire people based on 3 different tests. They're all quantitative tests that every analyst candidate that we've hired so far has taken and passed, including myself. So if the candidate takes the first test, he or she passes that, he or she qualifies to take the second. They take the second. If they pass the second, they qualify to take the third. If they pass the third, they're hired. And guess what? Their salary, their remuneration is directly correlated to their scores on the tests. It's a very quantitatively driven process. And look, it's worked. Now, here's the downside. The pass rate for candidates to pass all 3 tests is 0.5%. The reason I say it's a downside because you have to go through 200 people taking all those tests to pick one. That's been a frustrating result for us because sometimes it can be time consuming. Imagine getting 200 people to take the test and you get one candidate that passes all 3. So that's been frustrating, but you know what? The alternative is worse because when we hire not based on the test results, we make mistakes by hiring the wrong people. And it's really bad for both the firm and the candidate because as a candidate, you don't want to end up in a job that you're not able to perform. So when they pass the test, we know that there's a high probability that they're going to perform very well. And it's good for our clients, it's good for the firm, and it's good for the candidate. So that's kind of the process we started off, and we've stuck with it for the last 2.5 decades.
I've never heard of that process before. Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, Shashi, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us, to go through this, to tell us a little bit about your story. We look forward to having you on future episodes and just hearing more about what you're doing. And we just wish you all the best going into the new year.
Thank you very much. It's good to talk to you both. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Look forward to talking again.
Good seeing you. Thank you very much.
Same here.
Bye.